SG, can you check if I'm live?
You just came up.
I believe that I'm. Yeah, that's what it says.
Yeah, that sound was you. You're here.
Okay. Well, I'm live. And as I've mentioned before, one of my favorite things is nights, and we can leave it to our mainstream media to point us in the right direction, oddly enough. So I will play this, and maybe I'll talk during it.
Hidden among the pages of this text is an extraordinary find, one that challenges the history books. The pages describe in intriguing detail the inner workings of a fully automated android, made to look like a knight.
So now what it's left us with is having to be detectives. It's a bit like an archaeological dig. We have to go in, we have to look at the drawings over and over and over again.
Well, let me say this. He says that we need to look at the drawings over and over again. It's a weird thing to say because a mechanic doesn't need to look at these over and over again. They can see exactly what it is. And I don't really know what else to say about that. I think that's a weird thing to say.
Florence, Italy is where Leonardo did much of his work. Alessandro Romanelli is a curator at the Leonardo Museum in the city.
Alessandro Romanelli.
It is here that robotics historians have actually reconstructed Leonardo's robot knight, based on sketches made by Leonardo himself 500 years ago.
Leonardo dedicated himself to the project of an automaton, which is a humanoid machine.
Do you really think that's a replica? Or do you think that thing's been around forever? Something tells me that this is another founded artifact rather than something somebody recreated. That's just my opinion. Let's continue.
Leonardo's android was designed based on an advanced knowledge of biomechanics.
And that's the science of how our bodies move. And so he was all the time thinking about, how could I make a machine that would be like a person?
Leonardo's robot was designed to replicate human movement through metal. Muscles, tendons, and ligaments were all first studied meticulously before their function was transformed into the robot's design.
Leonardo thought of the human body as a wonderful, perfect machine, and he tried to create a mechanical model that could reproduce the effect of human movements.
Cogs in the chest of the robot were attached to axles that were wound with rope. As the key cogs rotated, the rope became unwound or wound tighter. The rope was attached to the limbs, and as the rope was pulled or released, the limb moved.
It worked through the effect of tightening and loosening the ropes to simulate the traction and straining of limbs.
You know, one of the reasons why it's a psychological thing, right? Look how beautiful this woman is. So all people, male and females, tend to believe people who are on the more beautiful side, right? So, you know, why not get her to talk about it? One other thing about this is that you really think this thing was rinky-dink with twine and rope? That's the recreation, right? That's the sort of false recreation of this thing. And I don't think there was just one, and I don't think that Leonardo was fascinated by human movement. I think if he existed, right? If whoever made this, they made lots of them. I mean, obviously, I don't know, but we do know that knights existed, and a lot of us in the mysteries of the realm wonder what these really were. And I think this is quite fascinating, regardless of where the information comes from, or who presents it.
Beneath the knight's armor, we can see the gears and ropes that turned to tighten and loosen the ropes attached to the arms.
We can see the wheels in the robot's chest.
The ropes were fed from the cogs in the chest through the shoulder and
just be careful, because we have this language. She used the word wheels. She's not going to be able to explain anything mechanically to us, right? Because she's already using the wrong words. You know, I'm a stickler for definitions. And she's touching a gear and calling it a wheel. Just a pet peeve, you know. The story's hacked, right?
all the way down the arms. The result was that the turning of a gear produced a movement in the limb.
This would be the movement of the arm.
Put together, it produced a remarkably human result.
So what the robot can do is hug someone. So they reckoned it went up to people and hugged them.
The robot knight would have enthralled.
Oh, really? This robot went up and hugged people, huh? You think this thing was made to be to be a door greeter? I mean, I think he was used to grab people. You know, that's more like what it is. But the way he puts it, oh, it was a nice thing, right? This thing wasn't nice. It wouldn't have been clad in battle armor if it was. Again, you know, they're trying to make it out like it was a door greeter. What the hell would this thing be doing hugging anybody anyway? I mean, just think of how obfuscated that is.
And entertained audiences wherever it went. But were there robots of the ancient world designed for more sinister and violent purposes? The ancient Greeks lived in an age of myth and legends.
Oh, here we go down the
world
narrative
populated
path.
by gods and monsters.
Oh, with
But in
creepy
ancient
music,
texts, there are stories of another kind of being. This one, fully mechanical. Stories of
Leonardo da Vinci seems
Okay, let's.
to have encrypted the great
Of course, it was made for sinister things. Skip this ad and get back into this, I hope. Yep.
Homer, the most famous of ancient poets and writer of the tale of Troy, tells us of the god Hephaestus, the Greek god of smelting and metalwork.
He was the god of blacksmiths. He was the god of manufacturers. He was probably the first engineer ever on Earth.
Oh, and it's so serious.
Ancient texts say that Hephaestus lived high in the mountains of
They
ancient
use
Greece.
these serious people,
And
right?
it was here he had his forge, where he smelted, beat, and created weapons,
Talking about
armor,
Knight
and
Skull.
all things metal
Glad
for the
you could
gods
join us.
themselves.
Can you hear me over the
He was
thing? How's
said to
everything
have produced
sound?
countless ingenious mechanical devices. But intriguingly, Homer tells us that he also forged robots. They are described as having 3 legs and could move and operate independently, as if they were living beasts, truly ancient androids.
Many of the historical references which we read now seem to be fantastical or even ridiculous in the claims. But one of the things that becomes more apparent the more one delves into it is that there may well be a grain of truth in some of these claims.
But is the idea of real working android soldiers in the ancient world as
Skull, can you hear
far-fetched
everything
as we
all right?
might think? The Greek
Oh, you
myths
just
tell of
answered.
ancient supersized humanoid warriors.
A good example here is the
Supersized.
man-robot android called Talos, who was made as a gift to the king of Crete.
Yeah, well, all of this is
Legend
pretty
has it that
subjective,
Zeus, the supreme deity and
and
father of the gods, gave the robot giant to the king of Crete.
you know, I don't know how far I'll let this go because I didn't really watch the whole thing, but there you have the knights. So it may give us a small speculation into what the knights actually were. Were they robots? Were they, were they made out of twine? I mean, this whole thing could be made up too, right? Although we do know there was some armor in the old world. We're not really sure what's going on. I'll play this a little more and see what we have. But that's essentially what I wanted to show. You know, basically, I've already said it. The mainstream media isn't actually hiding old world robots, right? They just don't. We just don't learn about it in school.
An island off the coast of Greece. The elite warrior was charged with defending the island against all enemies.
Talos was claimed to be able to move, was claimed to be able to fight, and was given to help defend the place.
Talos would run around the island 3 times a day and pelt invaders with large boulders. Was this the world's first robot warrior?
If anything, it was robotic.
Well, not the first. I mean, why do they always put these unrealistic scenarios on this stuff? Da Vinci only made one robot. Talos was one robot. You know what? They don't want to scare us with robotic armies, but we might have them now. We just wouldn't know. We may find out the hard way, though.
In shape, but probably consisted of a person in a suit.
Whether the Talos existed or not, it is evidence of a fascinating discovery. Even if the ancient Greeks did not yet have the technological capability to build human replicants, they had taken a massive conceptual step. They strived to create machines that behave like humans. They understood that with the right technology, human robots could one day be constructed.
Most of the cultures
No, human automatons were constructed. Isn't that what they're trying to tell us? And now they backtrack. This is what happens so often when you read stuff. We're going to go into a video that I made, and it's the same old story. After I get done with this, we'll go there. But it's the same old story. First, they tell us it was done. Then they tell us it may have been done. It's just like a story of some, well, I'll get to it, and probably, hopefully I remember to say it. But they always do this. Like one paragraph will say they did something. Then one paragraph will say somebody said somebody said or wrote that they did it. And then by the time the article's done, they're not really sure if somebody did it. They always do this. And I hope I remember to bring it up when we watch the other video. Because it always seems that way. And it's like for me, when I read stuff like that, I'm like, all right, so there's 3 different stories. So you can pick which narrative you choose. Right? There's always 3 sides to the story and not just 2. It's just frustrating when you're, trying to research stuff and you literally come across 3 different stories in the same article. And it happens over and over again. Okay, let's continue.
in the ancient world had mythological references to robotic machines or robotic people. There seems to be a sort of human obsession with machines that mimic the human form or animal form. They certainly were starting to put together the ground rules of robotic machines. They understood levers, pulleys. Most of the mechanical principles that we know of today were invented in those times.
The ancients clearly understood the concept of robotics, but were they able to put theoretical principles into practice? Remarkably, it would be left to one man to fully automate the ancient world. In his lifetime, the ancients would develop automatic doors, drink dispensers, and even...
Well, here's the thing. If they didn't have robots, how could they build this? Right? I mean, they needed robot construction equipment like we have today. So it's just the ancient world's filled with robots, not just human ones, all the ones we have today. Our society seems to be hiding. Well, they don't look like knights anymore. I wonder if that's the change in technology, right, for us. I don't know.
Lifetime, the ancients would develop automatic doors, drink dispensers, and even the same principles that drive today's motors and machines.
So let's see where we go now.
Although we may think of robots and androids as being an invention of the 20th century, there is incredible evidence of early automated devices in antiquity. At the height of his power, Alexander the Great's empire covered much of the known world. And perhaps the jewel in the crown of his dominion was the city which still bears his name, Alexandria.
Robotics seems to have begun in ancient Alexandria around about 300 BC.
In 300 BC, Alexandria was the most vibrant intellectual city in the known world.
This occurred basically because Alexandria was set up as a city where learning was very...
Again, it's kind of like the movies. They do these documentaries like the movies. It's the only known civilization that had intelligence. Just like, you're the only boy who can save the world, right? It's so silly. It's so dramatic and so silly. You can hear the music. Bang, dzz, you know that stuff has an effect on you while you're sitting on the couch, eating your supper and drinking your beer, right? Especially with surround sound, it makes it much more tantalizing.
very important.
And leading the field was an inventor who can claim to be called the godfather of robotics, Heron of Alexandria.
He's the big name, and it's for one simple reason. 5 of his books are still in existence.
Heron's books are evidence of an Alexandrian society that was so advanced, they became the center of learning and technological achievement throughout the known world.
Some of these early peoples were far more sophisticated than we give them credit for. They were at least as intelligent as we are now.
No, the whole plane of existence was more intelligent than we give it credit for. Right? I mean, that's the consensus that we have. You know, they try to play these things down so you don't think too much.
Their mastery of philosophy, of astronomy, of what we would now call physics, was absolutely
that we
immense.
now
So
call
this would be dangerous.
that we now call physics. This is getting better and better. When wasn't physics called physics? Yeah, okay, dude. And notice how we have all these, like I said before, right? These serious people with these very intriguing accents, right? To make it seem, you know, you can see what's going on.
Dangerous for us to underestimate their capacity.
But is there evidence that the ancients actually devised fully automated devices? The answer is yes. Recently, new discoveries dating back thousands of years now tell us that the ancients did in fact have and use advanced automated machines. Worshippers visited temples with self-opening automatic doors. Audiences flocked to automated puppet theaters.
You mean like a grocery store and Disney's Wide World and stuff? Yeah, so what? That stuff's, they're acting like that's some kind of mythological achievement or something. We have these things all the time.
And ancient texts even tell of chariots flying through massive temples.
But again, I wonder if the TV has a frequency where it like where like it shuts off your brain so that you'll only take in a piece of information and forget about every other logical thing that exists, or every other logical like thought that exists or idea. It's just funny. It's just funny. It's funny the wording that they use. I love it. You know, it intrigues me.
Seemingly on their own. By the 3rd century BC, the city had become an ancient technopark, where sophisticated machines played a part of everyday life. And at the center of it all was Haran.
And we might be talking about what amusement parks originally were. I mean, I don't know. I would love to know what amusement parks originally were. I mean, they could have been rides, but that's a question for another video, right? That's a whole nother subject. But they're making it seem like there was places that were sort of like Westworld, right?
He was renowned for testing
I'm sure
and
there was.
demonstrating his theories and devices to produce wonder and entertainment.
He describes many, many different inventions that were designed to surprise and give the impression of magic.
And don't forget, he was a showman. His work was to display and make people really excited about engineering.
Alexander
Or destroy the old world. Maybe.
Alexandrian high society kept up with the latest developments in technological innovation, even at their own dinner parties. Richard Windley is an historical model maker and specialist in recreating Haran's amazing devices.
Yeah, Haran's amazing devices. Let's see some more robots. Well, that's all for that, because I don't think we're going to even go back to they put that in the beginning so you'll forget about it by the end, right? And they have all these like really cheap sort of parlor trick gadgets as we move on from here. So if you care to watch the rest of that, you can. I am going to move on to our next thing. And that is a video that I did. I may interject, I may not. Anybody in the comments can tell me whether you can hear this well enough. And here we go. So if you watched Baltimore Fats' last video, Star Fort City, oh, it might not be his last at this point, but then you'll know he drew a line from Fort McHenry to see where it ended up. It goes close to Montauk, which is no surprise. So we're going to come down here to the plain and see, this is Griswold, Connecticut Battlefield State Park. This is the great stage that will play out the Benedict Arnold traitor drama. The twists and turns. I mean, this should have been a bestseller instead of a history lesson. And just in case you're not aware, this is where the Gillette Castle is, and another piece of the Earth Star is across the Thames River in New London, and this is Fort Trumbull. All these Earth Stars have the same war story, and I'll be bringing that back up again. It'll be pretty obvious by the time I get there. Then it goes over here through the East Coast and right through Plymouth Rock. I had mentioned that there was an Earth star here. Well, I should have been more clear because I have a suspicion that there's a remains of one, but we'll come back to that. Our videos are going to diverge quite a bit from the Plymouth spot, but I'm glad he mentioned it because it prompted me to do some examination of the Earth over here, which I've never done and have wanted to do. Right now, we're going to follow this line to its end, and it ends at the Cabal. You know, I mean, it never ceases to amaze me what goes on, right? He discovered the Azabawith, right? The Azabawith Lake. And it was a good catch because right as he was saying it, I was thinking it. So it's funny how sync works. We're going to go back to Plymouth. Right now, we're going to take a quick jump over to Fort Independence or Castle Island or Williams Castle or Williams Island. You know, it has a bunch of names, so it's confusing as possible. But guess who was stationed here? Good buddy. So I thought that I'd shout out Baltimore Fats and say I agree that this guy and his family were connected to something. Okay, the numbers are counting down. So now we're going to be transported back to Plymouth. Right near Plymouth Rock. And I'm just going to look at the landscape here and not say much. Just let you look at it as well. And see if we see anything curious. I mean, I could say a lot, right? But just looking at what the Oracle gives us to assess. Okay. All right. So now we're going to have the Oracle transport us back to Boston, Castle Island, which is a short drive from Plymouth. Let's just look at the landscape around this fort real quick. Obviously, over the years, this place has been abused, and some of the workmanship is pretty shoddy. And a lot of this stuff they intended to hide, just, you know, it can't be hidden. Because this thing was never meant to be demolished by tiny men who don't have an ounce of technical info on how this thing was constructed or how to dismantle it. And, you know, for the most part, this thing's a mess because that's all the little folks could do for decades when they confiscated this earthworks, right? Even if these earthworks were dilapidated when they found them, what could the construction crews conceivably do to work the earth so that they'd stay hidden? Or even worse, pretend that they built them. Because again, just to repeat an already ridiculous narrative, right? These are horse and buggy and rope and pulley constructions, right? That's what they've wanted us to believe for aeons now. This is starforts.com, and I'm shouting them out because I used a few pictures from their site. And here we have those blocks again. So this is our friendly neighborhood Army Corps, who always seems to be stationed at these earthworks. And this is how they usually present themselves to the public. Basically, any American Earth Star, railroad, or castle has their plaques on it. A theory is that they have been entrusted or authorized to dig stuff out and prop it up so that these sites are suitable for the marble people to believe that our civilization built this realm. Hello, Inquisition. Glad you could join us. Well, as far as the Roman people of that area, I Roman's a strange word. Greeks, Romans. There's lots of names we could call the ancient people. There's a few other ones, right? I don't know if... I just don't like such, I guess you'd call it hard and fast rules of who the people were in antiquity, I should say. Punctured, that's a good one. Roaming around the world, yeah. I've been looking into something else about the East Coast. You know, New England, that area. Being called Norumbega or Norumbega, there's a couple ways to say it, but as I've explained in another video, I heard about it when I was in junior high, and now there's quite a few. There's 2 or 3 videos out there that I've found about Norumbega. So, you know, it's hard to put these things together. Were the Romans part of Norumbega, or the Greeks, or was it the Norumvegians? You know, that's why having hard and fast rules about naming conventions is really tough for me, because what are they going to call us when we're gone? The Stupidonians? You know, it's the Starfort thing I'll go with. As far as a city, I don't know. A couple of the maps have it just like plastered across whole regions. So, you know, and hey, I'm not arguing with you. I have no idea. All I'm saying is that I've seen some really interesting, you know, I like to do a lot more research on it, but Norumbega is hard to research because obviously it's been lost to time. And that's the way it is, right? But I thank you for your input, and I'll continue this video. But why are we expected to affix ourselves to a belief in or of anything at all from any source? You know, that's been a big question for me ever since I was a kid. Why do people want to use my thoughts to think their things and then expect that of me? So many of us have grown up feeling something is off in this space. The same feeling we get when we look at how this place is constructed. It's all blocks. So much block work. The whole island, basically. The question is, who would build this and not want to continue building them today? And here again, I just wanted to be clear. Edgar Allan Poe has history with this earthworks. Taking a look at some maps. So this says Fort Independence, Castle Island. You can see here it says before 1920, it was an actual island. 1888 map of Boston Harbor showing Castle Island as an island. Because as we can see, this is Boston Harbor. And this is President's Road, whatever that means. But they're 2 different places. So do they want us to believe that Castle Island and the mainland grew together due to man's progress? Moving earth and building a connection? You know, this is Governor's Island. This is Apple Island. This is Snake Island. It all got connected somehow. And this is mainland Boston now. It just doesn't add up. And we're going to go to another map here, I guess just to stress a point. Where's all the islands in Boston Harbor that we see today, right? I mean, this basically looks like a damn mess ever since I've been around. This looks neat and pretty, right? This here is Roxbury, and we will be looking at most of the maps with Roxbury in the southwest corner of the screen. And this will be north as indicated. So the next picture is... So here we have the narrative of the British destroying Fort Independence and burning Castle Island, which they were told to do after their defeat there. Now, I want to point something out on this. It says that we have to understand how important Castle Island was to the siege of Boston. That's where these depictions and all this stuff is going to come from. The siege of Boston. If you never heard of it, I'm going to tell you what the siege of Boston is about. Okay? From my point of view, my pontifications, this is just where I'm coming from. So we have this journal entry from a guy named Archibald in 1776. From now on, I'm going to call him Archie, okay? So Archie is a captain of engineers, and he's with Captain Montressa. So their plan is to get all the regiments embarked on boats and stay behind with 3 other corps. Basically, what they're going to do while nobody's around is set fire to the houses through Hull near Boston on their way to Castle William. Archie claims they wouldn't be followed if they set fires to the town. Now, this is interesting. I don't think I quite got it across, but these guys are going to burn basically a whole city down, so they won't be followed by the enemy. How does that even make sense? Like, isn't that the last thing you do is attract attention with huge lights in the sky? You know. Inquisitive, thank you very much for the compliment. I'm sure glad. Yeah, I'm going to go along with Skull, who's writing in the comments right now that I check out your stuff if you posted. You seem to have some deep thinking going on. Yeah, of course you've considered compiling it, but once you start compiling it, it becomes a lot of work. You know, videos and compiling research to present to somebody, it's no joke, right? I think a lot of people find out how difficult and time-consuming making videos is. Of course, that's not a complaint at all, because it's very satisfying to get your point across, if you will, through images. It's something that the human beings love to do. Actually, by any medium at all, right? Whether it's music or cartoons or just clips from the internet. So let's continue. So we're at Montressa and Archibald burning down Hull, and this is an article up on the screen. Well, this continues to scroll. This is articles about how much damage was done, and that's why I put it up there. Okay, let's go. But isn't that the exact opposite of what you would do if you wanted to hide? Fire? Now, the thing is, I've read a lot, and I was basically trying to hone in on how these people got to the island. Because although, obviously, the military uses ships and boats to cart people around, right? This guy keeps using a word called transport. Does transport mean some kind of aerial vehicle, some kind of pneumatic train, or underground system? Because transport and ship or boat could be the same thing. He's making specific determinations of words, right? So I just don't know. I don't know how they get over to the castle. If they even get over to the castle by water. At this point, because the maps are so convoluted, I don't know if it's connected to the mainland or not. Or is it connected to the main line by the underground system? It's just mysteries of the realm. So Archie and Montressa get over to Castle Island to make sure the mines are placed and loaded. He doesn't say guns. He doesn't say cannons. He says mines. The thing is, he's definitely making a distinction, right? Because he states that the rebels seized some guns on the shore, actually in Dorchester. So guns and mines, they're two different things, right? In his mind. I want to go back to this picture really quick, if I can get it back. Mines, they're two different things, right? In his mind, and he's talking from an engineer's point of view, right? So these engineers, this is hard to control. Sorry, guys. Because the maps are so convoluted, I don't know if it's... He's definitely making a distinction, right? Because he states that the rebels seized some guns on the shore. Actually, what color are these guys? And how old do you think this is? Honestly, how old do you think this is? Everything's overgrown. Got some strange cannonballs there in the... Let me hide this, and you can see these over here. Do these fit in here? Is this stuff... What is this? This is a picture. This isn't actually them seizing the cannons, obviously. It is just a picture to, you know, bring the... What's this? To bring the vision... excuse me. To bring the vision into your head. That very strange characters around here. Let's continue. I just want to point that out and give you a moment to look. I don't know what's going on. Is this even a gun? Is this even a cannon? What is this? Actually in Dorchester. So guns and mines, they're two different things, right? In his mind, and he's talking from an engineer's point of view, right? So these engineers load up the mines. Then a convoy from Halifax sails up, and the engineers and the artillery troops are all ordered off the island and not to return until the castle was destroyed. The demolition didn't go so well, and a cannon blew up when they tried to fire it, wounding 7 of their own guys. A few days later, they pulled the engineers back to the island with a threat of the rebels attacking the fortification. And they planted 63 more mines. And then they send everyone off the island again. And then when they get everyone loaded up on the ships and they're alone again, right, Montressa and the engineer corps, they stay behind, and the destruction crew burns down the port. And this is what he says. As we laid out in boats, the mines were fired, and they had very good effect. So what are we talking here? Archie here, he's pretty proud that he was burning the top ground and detonating the underground during his service. You know, he is supposed to be under command of Montressa for the colonists. So why lay waste to so much American infrastructure? Don't you find that strange? I find it strange. I'm coming to the pontification here that these guys were saboteurs. And most of the British that were sympathetic to the colonies were undermining the whole effect, if there was ever a war here. Now, I don't believe the absolute totality of fighting was staged, because I do believe that the British Empire confused the colonial settlers as to who the enemy was. On the one hand, the Brits were financing politics, business, schools, and siding with constitutionalism. And on the other hand, you had redcoats that were firing point blank into crowds. And now you have New Englanders at each other's throat. See, there was a lot of different ethnicities. And with that comes different cultural and religious integrities, right? So the colonists aren't secure and trusting the redcoats. And the redcoats don't trust each other either. None of the sides knew who they were actually fighting. And adding to the confusion, there's talk of the rebels rising out of all this. Point is, no one seems to be fighting Americans. Even George Washington was a British sympathizer and led a continental army, not Americans. And by the way, Georgie boy had little practical experience managing armies.
What?
So we have another Hail
that
Mary
hippie you got
story
down there.
of a
Oh.
guy who didn't know
Yeah.
how and wasn't qualified, but somehow, by the skin of his wooden choppers, he ends up winning a revolution. Yeah, it just sounds like the plot of the latest Hollywood movie to me. The narrative tells us that George is a third-generation immigrant from way back in 1677. His family were never called Americans, and they never fought for anybody but the English from here, from these lands. See, they were setting up English armed coalitions against the Indians. And get this, who were the only ones labeled Americans, funny enough. Now, given the narrative, how can we be sure who the Americans were back then, or at any point in time for that matter? I have a suspicion that the word Indian, Native, or Indigenous are all obfuscations. These words. I'll get back to it in a second, but I just want to say, if you see a link under my name in the comments, these are people that I frequent, and don't be afraid to click on those links. They're not bullshit, and they're not spam. If somebody mentions a channel, I like to go get it and pop it in the comments. So with that said, we'll continue. Words boil down to grade school tales and beliefs, of course. If Georgie boy is a real tranny, entity, then him and his family been tracking down and trouncing Americans since way before the revolution. You know, think 1968 Planet of the Apes. You know, me. I'm just having a little fun. And of course, let's not forget making sure that the Brits at home weren't getting shafted in the trade agreements overseas here, because they already controlled these lands. This is British soil. The whole American thing to me is false. This American stuff, obviously I don't know, but the whole thing is really convoluted with people thinking that it was a British-American war. Far from that. Far from that. I realized something that seems unrelated to the revolution, and that is the mound builders of America. You might be thinking, come on, mystery, how can you intertwine the ancient mound builders into the revolution? Well, hear me out. The tie-in is the ethnic cultures coming to the new land with deed papers to start a new life. One thing that people tend to forget about the revolution was the Spanish, the French, and the Dutch military were all here along with the Brits, and they weren't all getting along. Some of these countries that were in this war were selling folks land in America. So when the buyer got here, they would cultivate the land and build and dig and make it a place to call home, right? Makes sense. So the American dream has always been a thing. That's what I take from that. And I didn't put it in the video, but the land of opportunity, right? But just like now, any opportunity that you forge for yourself gets obfuscated by the controllers or the programmers, just like back then. It seems to me anyway. It's, nothing new under the sun. America's always been the same. America has never been primitive. I don't think any of these lands I don't believe in primitive man. I think the little circle of our realm has always been just like it is. And the narrative of unintelligent species, it might be made out of whole cloth. I don't know. it's a very confusing subject. I just have this feeling about, I didn't even believe it when it was being pushed down my throat in my social studies class. Just never sat well with me, right? You know what I mean? Okay.
Sense. Once an immigrant and family proved how rich the land was, I'm sure it was forcefully taken away by 3 or 4 different military factions at any given time. And you can be sure that if the land under the immigrants' feet had treasure buried by the mound builders, then these military factions would be in a firefight over whatever riches were uncovered. And I can bet that the owner and the family were caught in the crossfire. So there wouldn't be any dispute about who actually owned the land and the treasure. Now, I keep mentioning the land because fertile soil was something they claim around the Revolution time wasn't abundant. So one of the things about land being really rich was, super soil. And like I said, not to mention what's buried under that super soil. And this is where I believe the rebels came from. I think immigrants started realizing that it was a scam, that they would buy land in America and come over here and do years of hard work. And once it was found out that their piece of land had value, well, I think you know where I'm going. So let's see who Archibald is, right? So we can get a beat on whether his tales are true or not. Well, he's so well connected. He helped George Washington build, illustrate, and map out battle plans, and stood by his side while old Georgie was defeated in some of these skirmishes. So in actuality, he helped him lose too. And I'm not saying there's any conspiracy there, but they didn't hang this guy or chop his head off. Not battle plans, right? They just continued and continued and continued, right? After his impeccable career of being a master at just about every creative industry, it's unbelievable what this guy is attributed to. He retires to this place in Scotland. So we're just going to look at this absolutely fantastic place. I mean, as far as I'm concerned, this is technologically insane. It says that he retired a rich man. Apparently he did. Which castle did he live in, right? I mean, my goodness. Holy mackerel. It's so funny because a lot of us have this thing where, and I agree, we were way more technically advanced at one time. Well, maybe not we. This land was way more technically advanced at one point. Well, let me ask a question. Do you think all this stuff was wrecked in 1775? Or do you think this guy lived with all this technology when he retired? I just don't know when everything fell apart and rusted. And we don't know. And he also has a statue dedicated to him. This is not him, but this statue is dedicated to him. And this is not necessarily him, but it's a lot of his artwork. And I just wanted to pull this up just so you can see at the top here all the things that he's a master of. So let's go to Montressor, Captain Montressor. He was British, and it's claimed that he was fighting for colonial independence. But at the same time, talking with his home country and going to visit rivalry forts. Now, throughout my life, I remember in junior high that I was told the story of how the men who fought the revolution were tough as mountains and so committed to the war effort that the troops would continue to fight with frozen toes due to worn-out boots in the cold mud and snow because they would eat the leather of their galoshes and utility belts. Now, I always wondered where these notions came from because it's pretty ridiculous, right? But lo and behold, I wasn't imagining things. Here we go. Montressor. These two guys and the engineer corps were ruining cannons everywhere they went. Their favorite method was called spiking. Now, there are a few other ways to render a cannon inoperable. Now, of course, the excuse they used is that they didn't want the enemy to use them when they captured the fort. But if they permanently incapacitated their own weapons, how would one defend a fort with a spiked cannon if they ended up taking the fort back? Wouldn't that be the goal, to win the fort back and push the enemy further with the wrath of the cannons? I mean, geez, do you like your flapjacks burnt or half-baked? Now, some of the new articles on the spiking claim that it was reversible, but Archibald says the cannons are done once you spike them.
I think this reversing the damage narrative is so they don't get caught having a battle where the cannons were supposed to be unusable. See, they can just excuse it by saying the troops repaired the weapon. But from what I understand about the damage done, you wouldn't have time to repair the brass or the cast iron soon enough to make a stand with it. See what I'm saying? The even deeper question here is, did the engineers carry around full brass repair factories? And we all know what cast iron is, right? Just let these tales of repairing cannons sit with you a while after you see these pictures. Mysteries of the realm. Earlier I mentioned my transport theory, but this is just a quick tie-in with how Archie uses the word when he's traveling with Tressa. If Montressa is real, he knows the new land is the old world. Now, the weapons at Castle Island had never been used in battle. The only time they fired a cannon from there was a shot that injured 7 of their own guys. So they fired this thing once in the whole friggin' war. I feel bad for the cannons. They have such a convoluted narrative attached to them. So did the Brits know what they were and wanted them gone? Or did they just not understand what they were? Cannons are one of my favorite mysteries of the realm. Now, something I started to wonder about was, given the massive amounts of destruction that this regiment fulfilled, either the military engineers had zero regard for civilians and confidant, or there wasn't enough people to worry about. Is everybody in the military? One thing that I'd like to address is that if we look at Archie's wiki and other official sources, we find many of them skip over his illustrious military career. Born in 1765, he ends up having a diary by 1776. So he's 11 years. Now this gets interesting because the math doesn't add up. Here we go. Ready? He's old. And he's George Washington's favorite guy. And he's Montressa's favorite demolition guy. So he's making a trip from Scotland at 7 or 8 years old to become a high-ranking officer in the military in the new land. And the material doesn't agree on where he retired either. Either we know nothing about our master race of ancestors. You know, it could be that babies weren't helpless before, cutting umbilical cords, vax, medicine, shit food, crap soil, polluted air and water. Or 80% of this is baloney. Maybe a little of both. What it looks like to me is anytime either side had to stage a battle so that they could continue the destruction of the infrastructure over here, they would call the other side rebels. It's kind of like the witch trials in that just point at a group and call them the rebels, and that will justify planting more mines, right? Or running a blimp bomb raid over the area. It's simple and effective, really, just like the ghosts and the boogeymen that they fearmonger us with today. And, so many things just are not true. What the truth is, I don't know. I can't offer you answers, but I do offer you entertainment, I hope, and mysteries of the realm. Okay, let me just check something here. We're going on an hour. If you want to continue for a little bit, put it in the comments, or if you've had enough, put that in the comments too. I got one keep going. Funny thing about this video that we're watching, obviously, this is about the Boston Harbor and the Plymouth Harbor being a star fort before the destruction, and we can kind of see the aftermath of what happened to Boston after the blimp raid. I can't figure any other way they did it unless they literally had an awesome military with a barrage of weapons on them. But this video was supposed to just be about the land there and, you know, a little exploration, and it turned into all this other stuff. This video got away from me, and it's really long, and it's actually not finished. Yeah, Jared Booster's channel is cool too. There's a lot of good channels out there. So I guess I'll continue with the video. Now, this is a military engineer's map, 1776. At first glance, I thought, oh, blast sites. Then I thought eradication targets in general, because these are different marks than these, right? So I did this out of curiosity and having a little fun with my programs. Your guess is as good as mine whether this overlay is a factor of relevance. You know, it's hard to say. I wonder if they bombed all these places and made holes, right? Because this map is old. This just corroborates the Brits were destroying much of the American shoreline and fortifications when they vacated. And this also corroborates the Edgar Allan Poe thing. I came across these writings and used this guy's coordinates to find Castle Island from Foster's Wharf. And it matches the current position of Castle Island today, southeast by east. He goes on to say, at the very early period, after the first settlement of Massachusetts, a small fort was erected by, maintained from, and garrisoned with the Dorchester people, agreeable to the best information from respectable authority. In the reign of King William and Queen Mary, it was honored with the name of Castle William, either by express orders from the crown or as a provincial compliment to his then majesty. So I'm not going to read the whole thing, but he also corroborates that the Brits were blowing stuff up upon evacuation, not retreat, and then tells the same story that the Montreser boys blew themselves up messing with cannons. One thing that strikes me is the majority of reference material that I've been reading is about vandalism, not battles or territorial scuffle. The ratio should be reversed. So I thought to myself, well, Dorchester isn't Boston, and he isn't talking about Fort Independence, and he mentions a citadel being destroyed. So I found this 1771 Williams Castle Island, complete with citadel, by none other than Dresser himself. Oh, don't be surprised. He has a few aerial maps. It doesn't seem to me that Montreser uses horses for the majority of his travel. He gets places so fast for the time period. So we'll look at this island in a minute. So I find this on an old military map, 1775 to 1776. There is no designation of forts here in Boston at all. No Independence, no Castle, no William and Mary. Following the same coordinates from Foster's Hill and Dorchester instead of Boston is Fort William and Mary. Call it fiction or whatever you want. I think this is the island that keeps getting referred to. This area had something happen to it and it scattered all out of shape.
and it looks here like the lands got renamed and redesignated. It's just puzzling. So let's compare these just for fun and see what we come up with. This is Roxbury above Dorchester, and that's the way it's going to be in every image. Roxbury, as far back as I can research, has always been a turnstile to Boston. So I'm circling them so you have an orientation when you look at the 1700 map. So we have here Governor's Island, we have Apples Island, and now we have Noodles Island, which is another mystery. And here is Fort Independence or Fort Williams Island. Now let's go here and see the military map. Here we have Roxbury and Dorchester, and William and Mary, Governor's Island, Apples Island, and Noodles Island. But Independence or Williams Island is up here at the top of Boston ever since I've been alive. But somehow we're supposed to believe this is the top of Boston. This is Fort Independence, and now they're attached. Again, this is Roxbury and this is Dorchester, not the top of Boston. Look at the space that needs to be constructed to do as the narrative explains, and then move Boston altogether. So confusing. And here's another overlay. This is Roxbury, this is Dorchester, and this is Fort Independence. Back to the question that I asked a while ago. These islands became connected due to man's ingenuity? Yes, it's true. We have 5 massive landfill projects and a wiki page that amounts to nothing. Wiki doesn't even give us any event agenda of this taking place. This must have been one of the biggest building operations that's ever been done. And yet Wiki doesn't care? How disrespectful to the folks who risked their lives to fill the ocean with garbage so that an airport could be built. You know, this is all adding up to burnt flapjacks. I was talking and I had my mic muted. I think that I'm going to leave it here for now. And oh my goodness, look at this. Beautiful. This is the way we want to live, right? This is living, baby. Well, I hope you enjoyed my live stream, and I'm going to go do something else now. Everybody enjoy their night, and I will see you all next time. This video will continue. Good night, and thank you for coming.